two. Get out. Okay, who wants to, who else does not want to participate? Okay,
Yeah.
get out and go read what's in the envelope. I'm serious. Okay. Out. And close the door behind you. All right. Well, so I was trying hard to do an imitation of an asshole, and I don't think I failed. I think I failed pretty dismally, didn't I?
It's gonna be gone.
I hope not. Come on back in, please. All of you, please.
I'm trying to be
So-
a nice guy.
I have just created a ethical dilemma, and you guys have really done very well, and I am very proud of you. I think everybody in this room deserves a round of applause for themselves, please. So what I just did in microcosm is what's happening here all over the federal government of the United States. And that is that there are people in authority who are asking system administrators to do things that they really should not do. When philosophers of ethics and morals talk about ethics and morals, we have a hierarchy of moral authority. And it starts with moral principles, which are generally short and pithy and easy to remember, such as the 10 Commandments. There are only 10 of them. The Boy Scout law, there are 12 of those. It's still easy to remember. There is the Oath of Hippocrates, which is basically do no harm. So those kind of broad ethical principles are simple, easy to remember, and if you ever find yourself in a dilemma, you can always go back to those moral principles and see if you can derive a course of right action. Now, you don't want to spend all of your time thinking about that kind of stuff. So from those moral principles comes ethical rules. So for example, there's a commandment, thou shalt not steal. Well, so what is stealing? And so then you get into, for example, burglary, which is taking by stealth, and robbery, which is taking by force, a threat of force, or fraud, which is illegal taking by guile. Those are all those examples of stealing. And what does it mean to take something of value? Those are ethical rules. And then, to make your life even easier or more complicated, depending on how you think about these things, there are applicable regulations. So, for example, in Europe, there's something called the, oh boy, I'm forgetting the acronym. I'm nervous. Thank you! General Data Privacy Regulations, which I think are wonderful. The Europeans are way ahead of the Americans in this sort of thing. But then we're still struggling with the English system. And then finally, you get into operating procedures, which is what your organization has set up in order to be in compliance with these applicable regulations. So this is the flow of authority. This is how you know that the operating procedures that you are operating under are morally correct, because you can go back up this chain to an original moral principle and figure out that, yes, I am doing the right thing, or no, I am not going to do the wrong thing. Does this make sense? Yes. Okay. So here are some examples of moral principles. The golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, or do not do unto others as you would not have them do unto you, or do not do unto others as you would want to do because their tastes might be different. Okay, those are all different ways of expressing the golden rule, but basically thinking about how I would like to be treated. So one of us, and I'm not going to name names, is a user. And so users have expectations of us system administrators. And so this is still relevant for the user, because if they don't know what their ethical and moral expectations ought to be, then they can't assert them when it is time for them to do so. So we were all users once before we became system administrators. Does everybody remember once we were a user? Okay, right. So, you know, this should be something that we're thinking about when in our practice as system administrators. How did we want our system administrator to treat us? This is how we should be treating our users. No matter how dumb or stupid or crazy they may be, we still have to treat them with courtesy and respect, because we were users once and we did dumb and stupid and crazy things. And of course, sometimes the system administrators, we still do dumb, stupid, and crazy things, but because we're root, we can do a heck of a lot more damage, right? Kant's more categorical imperative, which is, what if everybody did this? So what if everybody was root for everything? That would not be a good situation, isn't that right? Because, I mean, basically, when you're root, you're walking across a tightrope without a net. When you're a user, you have a net, and they give you a big tightrope, and it's nice and tight, and it's secure so it doesn't sway in the wind. So that's one of the reasons why we tell people, including system administrators, don't be root when you don't need to. This is why there's pseudo, okay? I would make the argument that we are ethically required to use pseudo only when we need to do something that requires root access. Otherwise, we should be using a normal user account with ordinary privileges. It's just to keep our user community safe from ourselves. The oath of Hippocrates is something that's taken by physicians. It is a bit controversial, in my mind anyway, because one of the things is a prohibition on abortion, and I happen to be pro-choice. But aside from that, it's not a bad recipe for how we ought to carry ourselves. And quite frankly, if you as a system administrator are called upon to perform an abortion, you've got other problems, because we don't know how to do that kind of stuff. Okay, I'm Jewish, so I'm a big fan of the Ten Commandments, but I'm opposed to legislation that mandates putting Ten Commandments in public school classrooms, because I would prefer that people be treated the way they want to be treated, and if someone doesn't believe in the Ten Commandments, I don't want it forced down their throat, even though I happen to agree with it. I just, you know, you have, part of freedom of religion is freedom from religion. And there are non-religious ways to lead an ethical and moral life. The Boy Scout oath, I used to be a Boy Scout. Some people claim I still am, even though I'm going bald. Okay, so I'm a bald-headed Boy Scout. But anyway, it's not a bad set of rules and regulations for teenage boys. Being a member of Boy Scouts was a fabulous experience, because I was in a community of like-minded boys and young men. And so we were able to be ethical, set examples with one another of ethical and moral treatment. And so, for example, when my scoutmaster washed my mouth out with soap, that was an example to the other members of the troop who were watching the exercise. Maybe it's not a good idea to go swear in front of the scoutmaster. And of course, the scoutmaster was a police officer, so he was well acquainted with people behaving badly. And he knew that in the grand scheme of things, I was not a basket case. And then what would be of most value to this community would be the legal professional system administrators, the large installation system administrators, and Usenex has a code of ethics that is easily available on their website, and I've got the URL for it later on in this presentation. So this is a brief synopsis of the Oath of Hippocrates, do no harm. And so this explains why am I as a physician going someplace? What is it that I am not going to do when I go there? Who do I have ethical and moral responsibilities to? Now, he's Greek, and yet he's still thinking about that he's got ethical and moral responsibilities to women, which is kind of unusual for Greek philosophers, and he's got responsibilities to people who are slaves, which is amazing for that time and place. This is an incredible liberal thing for him to write. He's talking about the need for confidentiality. In a minute, I'm going to talk about the CIA triad, one of which is confidentiality. And finally, he's talking about he's going to recommend that people eat healthy food. And this is something that I talk to my grandchildren about every time I take them to McDonald's. And it goes whoosh. So for those of you who were not Boy Scouts, this is the Scout Law. And if you look at these 12 things that Scouts are being asked to do, with the possible exception of reverent, those are all positive things that people really ought to do, people ought to be. This is the way people ought to behave, described as 12 words. The and doesn't count. When I was in Boy Scouts, my father was part of an Eagle Scout council, and he had a chance to go examine a kid who was going for his Eagle Scout who was an atheist. And this caused a great deal of controversy in his court of review because he wasn't reverent. And he was above board and honest about it. And so the men on this council were trying to wrap themselves around this axle around how, on the one hand, scouting is all about freedom of religion, that's very important to them, but they also want people to be, the boys to be reverent. And they finally decided that this kid's attitudes and thoughts were really well thought out, and he's obviously an honest kid, a good kid, so they did what I think is the right thing, and they gave him his eagle. But the fact that they had to have this conversation, and also this was back in the 70s, and I think people were thinking about atheism differently in the 70s than they are now. I would hope so anyway. So let me go on to some examples of applicable regulations. So the one that sticks most in my mind is something called Sarbanes-Oxley. And the reason why is because I have had to personally jump through all kinds of hoops in order to retain Sarbanes-Oxley compliance. And in fact, one day I had a yelling match with a manager who wanted me to make a change without filling out the appropriate paperwork. And I went to my boss, and my boss supported the manager. So then I decided to go skip a chain or two or three of command, and I just called up the chief corporate compliance officer, who was an attorney, told him who I was, who I worked for, and what the problem was. And a couple of phone calls were made, and the manager I had the yelling match with me came back, and he said, "Give me the form." So I gave him the form, and he signed it. And he said, "Don't call that guy ever again." And I said, "If you don't give me cause to call him, I won't call him." All right. I'm got a slide on that in a moment. The Presidential Records Act, probably none of us will ever have to go deal with it, because the probability that anybody in this room will be elected president of the United States is vanishingly small, but not impossible. If you want to be president of the United States, come talk to me afterwards. I've got some ideas. Graham-Leach-Biley Act is another rule about corporate governance and keeping records. The Computer Fraud and Abuse Act governs people that are trying to attack our computers. And there is language in there that suggests that the people who wrote it knew that system administrators are going to have to take steps to make sure that our systems are safe. Computer fraud and abuse mostly is focusing on perpetrators, but there is language in there for people who are playing defense. How many people here are interested in baseball? Okay, I'm not interested in baseball either. But one of the things that I find interesting about baseball, it is the only pro sports that I am aware of where the ball is under the control of the defense. So if you think about it for a second, the batter is in control of the ball only for the millisecond or two that the ball is in contact with the bat. Otherwise, it's the defense, the people that are trying to keep the batter from scoring, that have got control of the ball. Computer security is like that sometimes. We win when nobody scores. Okay. And finally, earlier I alluded to the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, and I think it's wonderful. I really do. And I wish the United States would adopt something like that. And our senator, those of us who are from the state of Washington, our Senator Maria Cantwell is actually very interested in that kind of stuff. So if you're interested in doing something like that, go write her a letter saying, let's do something like GDPR here in the United States. And that single sentence is actually quite a mouthful. But everybody who is anybody in the computer security business knows what GDPR is and thinks that the United States ought to implement something like that. It is a marvelous idea. So here are some examples of some operating procedures. When I was at Expeditors International, I had a book of operating procedures, and we never actually printed it out, but I estimate it ran to about 700 or 800 pages. So I'm not going to go into detail about that here because I'd like to get done before winter comes. But anyway, the most important acronym that I'm going to talk about in today's discussion, and I really am talking too much, is CIA, which in this case means confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So confidentiality means that information that is supposed to be kept confidential is kept confidential. You don't want your health records scattered out all over the internet. You don't want your bank account numbers scattered all over the internet. You don't want your family relationships scattered all over the internet if you can help it. You know, how many people are asked what is your mother's maiden name? Okay, that's not a good shared secret anymore, because your mother is known and her marriage information is known. So a suitably determined attacker can find out what your mother's maiden name is. It is a problem. So CIA, if there's nothing else you take away from today's discussion, please take away CIA: confidentiality, integrity, availability. So operating procedures, maintaining access control policies. In particular, if there is a disgruntled employee and they're fired, turn off their access right away. And no one has ever told me what a gruntled employee is. If there are disgruntled employees, you know, if you're not disgruntled, does that mean you're gruntled? I've never heard that adjective.
You're the employed ones.
I beg your pardon?
Those are the employed ones.
Yes.
Oh. You look like you have a
Even
question.
went so far as to turn off access controls if they were on holiday.
That's actually a marvelous idea, because that way if something goes wrong and your boss calls you up while you're on vacation and says, I need your help right away, sorry, can't do it. There's something to be said for that. Okay. You are required to have logging and auditing and incident reporting. And I just came from a discussion this morning about visibility into systems, and I thought it was a really marvelous discussion. But then I was thinking of all the megabytes and megabytes and megabytes of data that observability is going to create, and you've got to go look through that. So that really means you have to invest in some sort of automation to go look for a needle in a haystack. And you actually can find needles in a haystack, but you have to use a sufficiently powerful magnet. And you have to hope like hell that the needle is made out of something that's ferromagnetic, like steel. If you have a plastic needle, you can use as powerful a magnet as you want to, and you won't find it. So that's something to think about when you're doing your automation. You are ethically required to stay current with patching and vulnerability management. And this is one of the reasons why we want you to automate your patching procedures to the extent that you can. And one of the neat things about patching is how many times have you patched a Windows computer and you didn't have to reboot it? Has anyone here ever patched a Windows computer and didn't have to reboot it?
Never. Even back to Windows 95, still had to.
Yeah. So, and that means that when you want to go patch a computer that's running Windows that's in production, you have to stop production in order to do the patching. So that's disruptive. That means that you have to schedule a maintenance interval. That causes friction. That causes people to push back. Do you really need to patch the machine right now? Yes, there is a 0-day vulnerability with a CVE score of 9.8. So yes, I want to patch the computer right now. Well, you can't because it's in production. Whereas, in Linux,
That's not true anymore.
I beg your pardon?
It hasn't been true for 10 or 15 years.
What?
It does hot patching.
Windows?
Yes. Has done so for at least 15 years, probably 10 years.
How?
Hot patching has been around since the 1980s.
Yeah, but we don't trust it. Like every time I patch a Windows server, we reboot it immediately. It says so or not.
Okay, well, I'll just tell you.
That's been my experiences as well. And even people who are Windows experts told me that you have to schedule a maintenance window, take the machine out of production, verify that it's out of production, do the patch, do the reboot, bring it back up, test it, and then put it back into production and verify that it's in production.
I was in sustained engineering for Microsoft for 20 years.
Wow. This is not something that's generally known.
Yeah.
Actually, Microsoft just released a blog post 3 days ago advertising hot patching for Windows Server 2025. Saying, if you're tired of all the restarts, get hot patching for Windows Server 2025. It's available as of today.
Huh.
But anyways, continue.
Okay. I would argue that you are ethically and morally required to document your security and privacy policies. Now, one of the things that I did when I was hiring system administrators is I would tell a candidate, I want you to go home and write an essay on some technical topic of your own choosing. Choose whatever you want. I want to see an essay that's on the order of 1.5 pages to 2 pages. I want you to do it in 12-point Helvetica type, 1-inch margins, and then give it to me at your convenience. The hiring process is going to take a few days, so don't stress over it. You don't need to go get it done right away, but just show me an essay because I want to see how well you can write. And everybody thought I was weird for doing that kind of thing, but there were candidates who really had a great deal of difficulty writing about some topic that they knew about. And I would say to the hiring committee, the expectation is that the person we hire is going to write process documentation and user documentation. And I want them to be able to write clearly. And this person can't write clearly. And there was one guy who submitted an essay, and it was riddled with spelling errors that a spell checker should have caught. And yet, this is what he turned in anyway. And I felt sorry for him. And so I did something that I shouldn't have done. I called him up, and I said, I recommended that we not hire you. And this is the reason why, and this is how I think you ought to improve, so that the next time you apply for a position, and so, your word processor has got a spelling checking program in it. If it doesn't, there is a program in Linux called ASpell that will do spelling checking for you in a flat ASCII file. And his response is, you're not hiring me because I can't write well? Yes. What am I going to tell my children? Tell them to pay attention when they're studying language arts. This is why you go to school, to learn how to write well. One of the ways that we can detect scammers as opposed to real companies is because a real company will hire a technical writer to go write technical documentation. When I was at Google, I worked with a technical writer. She was a Vietnamese emigre, and she could barely speak English, but she could crank out the most beautiful prose. And we finally decided that the best way for the two of us to work together was for us to sit side by side, and we would send email messages to each other. And I know it really sounds funny, but it worked really well. The two of us were a fantastic team. It was great. So, documentation is important. And finally, I think that you're morally and ethically compelled to go take time out to go train yourself. And you're all here, by the way. So you're honoring that commitment, and I admire you. And you also have to go take time to train others. So next year, when you're at Linux Fest, I expect you to give a talk. All right, you've been warned. Okay. What happened to my... Oh, I pushed the wrong button. There's a reason why. Okay, great. Whew, I thought my presentation system. So I want to talk a little bit about ethical stakeholders. So these are all of the parties that have a stake, have an outcome, a vested interest in the ethical and moral decisions that we as system administrators make. Now, for those of you who are not system administrators, you are still ethical stakeholders, and you can assert that by virtue of the fact that you're a user of a computer system, this is an ethical responsibility that your system administrator has to you. So I have an ethical responsibility to myself. I have to get up every morning and look in the mirror and shave, and I want to make sure that I have at least some respect for the man that I'm seeing in the mirror. My wife, my children, my grandchildren, my parents, my siblings. These are all people that I've got responsibilities to. Forgive me, I'm tearing up. Please forgive me. My user community. These are the people for whom I serve. They are the reason that I exist as a system administrator. My coworkers. I have ethical responsibilities to them. They have ethical responsibilities to me. We're all holding each other by our throats. My organization. My organization has ethical responsibilities to me, and remember that next time you're being fired for no reason. But be that as it may, you still have an ethical responsibility to your organization. I had an argument with my brother-in-law, who is an attorney, about whether we are ethically and morally obligated to follow the law. His argument is that, and first of all, he's a very ethical man, but his argument is that it's not a moral and ethical obligation to go follow the law. It is a legal obligation to follow the law. There are consequences for not following the law. But then, one of the things that I discovered is that there are a lot of laws that are applicable that have no penalty. So, for example, in the United States, there's something called the Administrative Procedures Act, which outlines the procedure that you have to follow if you want to fire a federal employee. But there's no penalty if you don't follow the law. So, Elon Musk does not have any authority whatsoever to do any of the things he does because he's not a federal employee. Only federal employees can fire federal employees. That's violation number one. And then there's a process that you have to go through before you can fire somebody. So if someone gets a good performance review and then all of a sudden you send them an email message that says because of your bad performance, that's not following the law. Okay? But there's no penalty if you don't follow the law. Okay? So at that point it becomes a moral obligation. So I explained this to my brother-in-law, and he thought about it, and he said, yeah, I guess you're right. Leave that bullet point in. My vendors and my suppliers, I have ethical and moral responsibilities to them. When I'm asking a vendor to go buy something, the vendor can reasonably expect for me to have an honest explanation of what it is I'm looking for. And my suppliers, the people that uncut this backwards, my suppliers, I have an ethical responsibility to give them a clear explanation of what it is I want from them. And my vendors, they're the people that I'm not doing this very well. Never mind. When you're in a business relationship with some entity, regardless of whether you're the customer or whether you are the supplier, you have ethical and moral responsibilities, not just what's in the contract, but to go do the right thing. So if there's an ambiguity in the contract, you're not allowed to just unilaterally exploit it. You have to have a negotiation to say there's an ambiguity in the contract. What's the fair way to resolve this ambiguity? We have responsibilities to our competitors. Following the rules for fair competition is something that's important. I want my competitors to treat me fairly, which means that I have an obligation to treat my competitors fairly. And we can still compete, but we can't cheat with one another. It's like doing things like poaching employees or grabbing trade secrets, things like that. Those are really things that are not something you should do. My teachers and my students, yes.
So, I kind of wanted to push back on the poaching the employees bit.
Well-
Why do you think that that's
Well-
always wrong in all circumstances?
It's not always wrong in all circumstances. So, you can't poach a happy employee. It can't be done, because employees, people, when they've been in an organization for a while and they're invested in that organization, they don't want to leave. Leaving is traumatic. Okay, but if somebody knew, for example, that I work for Expeditors International and came up to me one day and said, Jeff, I understand that you're a system administrator at Expeditors International. I'd like you to come work for me. That would not be a cool thing for them to do. Because I've got a bunch of trade secrets from International, and I don't want to divulge those.
I've been pushed as a happy employee quite often.
Really? Did it work?
Offered a happier deal.
Well, so there's...
I was perfectly happy where I was.
Mhm.
He said, we'd like for you to work for us.
Mhm.
You know, here's an offer. It's like, well, I like this offer. I like what I'm doing, but
Mhm.
this offer is better. And my previous employer, he took that as a normal ebb and flow of career
Yeah.
building.
I guess that's my point. I don't necessarily, it can be done poorly,
Mhm.
fair, but there are situations, even if the person's happy, where another person's like, hey, I'm building out my team, you wanna come work for me? They're more loyal to the guy than they are to the company, and they go and they work for the other company.
Mhm.
And I don't think there's anything morally questionable with that.
All right, I will accept that. So let's just say it's nuanced, because I can see both good rationales and bad rationales for that kind of behavior. But would you agree with me that we have moral and ethical responsibilities to our competitors, even if we're not in agreement exactly what they would be? That's fair? All right.
A lot of your presentation so far has been very absolute in that you have moral responsibility or ethical responsibility, or you do not. But like this example right here, there is gray area, and I'm kind of hoping that you can discuss your thoughts on gray area now or at some point.
It's kind of gray. I have 45 minutes to get this presentation done. And your point is well taken, because there are a lot of areas which are gray. And I am oversimplifying. for example, it is immoral to commit murder. It's one of the 10 Commandments. It's not in the Boy Scout law, but it is in the 10 Commandments. But what does it mean to, so for example, if there is a war and you kill a soldier, is that murder?
No.
If there's a war and there's a soldier and he is hiding behind a pregnant woman and the fetus dies as a result of your killing the soldier, is that murder? If the woman dies because the soldier is standing behind her, is that murder? Is the soldier the one who committed the murder because they're standing behind the pregnant woman? Okay? So I am perfectly comfortable talking about gray cases, but again, I would like to get out of here before the end of the day. So your point is well taken. You are absolutely correct.
I kind of prefer to stay all day. This is kind of fun.
No, you don't, because I only have so many jokes,
I think we have a moral obligation to let him leave here on time.
But we can stay.
I've been thinking about this since I volunteered for this assignment last fall, and I finally came up with proposed moral principles for us system administrators, and I started with do no harm. And I really like that, even though somebody else thought of it 3,000 years ago. But then part 2 was allow no harm. And that's that we have to do what it takes to make sure that people are not harmed, either as a result of things that we do or things that we do not do, or things that we do poorly. So if we say we've secured a system, but we did a lousy job of it, that's a moral failing. If we don't attempt to secure a system, that's a moral failing. We have to go and train to learn how to secure our systems to make sure that when we say they are secure, they are. So, So I'm going to turn over for a moment to you. What does it mean to do no harm as a system administrator? What is it that we do or must not do in order to do no harm? Don't everybody answer at once. Yes.
So, we were just talking before this started, was that when we were doing database or software development, in order to access databases, they would just end up copying the database from production and put it into a test environment without making any changes, without obfuscating the names, the ages, whatever other information was out there.
Their personally identifiable information?
Yeah. And so one of the things that we started doing was going in and actually making that change. And the other thing that we did was emails were full names, Rich Becker. Instead now, at this place that I used to work, we modified it and they implemented it, and now it's first letter, last name. So you can't tell, the individual's gender. So, but that's, by doing something like that, that's do no harm. Because we're not allowing information to get out that shouldn't be getting out.
Okay. Good, thank you. Any other suggestions? What follows from do no harm? Please.
If you don't need to store data, don't store data.
Okay, good. Anybody else? Yes, please.
Oh, I was just gonna suggest, related to the personal information, many companies do kind of a corporate directory with pictures, which can be a problem for people being stalked and so on. Particularly, people knowing your schedule, knowing where you're going to be.
Okay.
Cindy Crawford.
I beg your pardon? Someone said something about Cindy.
Oh,
Cindy.
I just I used to work at a company where they did that, and I just put Cindy Crawford as my photo, so.
Yeah.
I mean, this was a while ago, like 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Or another, just sending data to a vendor that doesn't have the right to do it, or exfiltrating that data
Mm-hmm.
for what might seem to be harmless purposes, but then becomes harmful.
Okay, good, thank you. Those are all good examples. I keep pushing the wrong button. And then, what are the things that we do that prevent harm? Now, we just talked about do no harm, and the other is allow no harm. And they're very similar and different, and there's no hard and fast distinction between the two. But what are some of the things that we do that prevent bad things from happening? Please.
Well, you can, for example, maintain a list of the software that is on the system and its dependencies, not only for the purposes of identifying vulnerabilities, but for the purposes of, say, license compliance, since you had open source mentioned there.
Mm-hmm.
So like SPDX or some other type of bill of materials of what's on the system.
So you're talking about a software bill of materials. That is an excellent idea. How many people here have maintained software bill of materials? How do you do it?
Very.
I beg your pardon? Yeah. I mean, this is something that I've been trying to find someone who's doing it well and doing it efficiently. And I haven't found that yet. And if someone has figured out how to, Paul, I expect you to go talk to software bill of materials.
Sure.
Okay, next year. Okay.
Well, we just use Yocto, and Yocto generates this S-bomb.
Okay. Zoom in on his name tag.
We build an OS and we use Yocto to build it. And it gathers all of the license data and source data from the Yocto build files, and then generates an S-bomb for us.
That's really cool. Thank you. I expect to see you here next year. I'll help you get ready for it. Moral dilemmas happen when two ethical values collide with one another. So, for example, a manager comes to you and says something, and you really want to kill him, but murder is unethical, so you can't do it. That's an example of a moral dilemma. There was a fellow I was talking with yesterday who's working for a major retailer, and he was given the assignment of putting video cameras all over the store in order to prevent shoplifting. And the moral dilemma that he was up against was putting video cameras in the dressing rooms, because one common way of shoplifting is to go into a dressing room with some stolen merchandise and hide it and then walk out. And the video cameras in the dressing room would detect that sort of thing. But people have an expectation of privacy in the dressing room, which is why there are dressing rooms. So that's a moral dilemma.
You just control the entrance and inventory stuff going in and out.
Yes. That's a solution to the problem, but that wasn't the moral dilemma that he was facing at the time he was facing it.
Right, but moral dilemmas, then you look at alternatives.
Right, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's how you solve it. The moral dilemma that comes back to me from my childhood is the discussion in the Boy Scout handbook about your friends steal your sister's bike. So on the one hand, a Boy Scout is honest, so would not countenance anybody stealing anything. But then the fact that it's your sister's bike, you have a certain amount of loyalty to your sister, and you also have a certain amount of loyalty to your friends. And so what happens when one of your friends does something that harms a member of your family? And I remember we had a long discussion, a bunch of kids, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, coming face to face with these are some of the things that happens in the real world for the first time, I think, for many of us.
I think your friend vacated your obligation.
That was the conclusion that we came to, but it's not intuitively obvious, and for teenage boys, for friendship is a big deal. That's not an intuitively obvious answer. So we had to go through it kind of step by step. What does loyalty mean? If your friends are going to steal your sister's bike, does that mean they're loyal to you? Loyalty has got to be a two-way street, okay? And this is one of the things that I have a lot of heartburn with the way the current American administration is running. Loyalty can't be just one way. It's got to be both ways, or it's not meaningful. But your point is absolutely well taken. Yes?
Well, just a real world thing, you have to get something done over the weekend. Do you download that Excel, that data dump so you can work on it over the weekend at home? Or allow your friends to do that so they can get something done by Monday because it needs to get done?
Mm-hmm.
It's a moral dilemma
Yes?
and with high stakes,
Yes?
right? 'Cause that's another part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's right?
Yes?
So that's that happens every weekend.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, some of the moral dilemmas, someone here is a software developer, not a system administrator, but I came up with a moral dilemma for them. You have to do a release. This release is critical for the company's success. You're told it'll go bankrupt if you don't do the release this weekend, but you know there are security vulnerabilities in the code. Do you do the release or don't you?
This gets me back to the dressing room if there's mitigations.
Could be. Yes?
I've actually had to do this, a single, like I was asked at, and I don't want to say the project, it's a major company, but a single software tester would not have the power to stop a release, but it ended up like having to go 3 levels up, and then they made it like the top priority for the next release.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, well, that is a solution. Okay.
What are the consequences of this security vulnerability? What is stored on the system? What does it? What are the risks associated with it?
Well, yes, that's right. It is a very delicate trade-off that one has to make. And it depends on the value of the thing that this system is doing. When that was at one job where I was asked to go create a website, and my manager looked at my backlog and said, I won't be able to get to it for 2 months. And they said, well, we need it right away. So they went ahead and did it themselves. And they did it poorly, and it was hacked within 3 days of when it went up. And so then, once it was hacked, it was recognized as a security vulnerability, then all of a sudden the priorities changed, and I was told to go drop whatever it was I was doing and go work on it. So I was annoyed, but I did what I was told. So then the next time the same group came back to us and they wanted us to do something else, and again we told them it's going to take 2 months for us to get it through our queue. We're really backlogged. So they deliberately introduced a vulnerability into it, and then it became a priority project again because it was security vulnerability. So I went to them and I said, look, guys, you are abusing the system, and I'm going to do this for you because I was told to do it, but I am not happy with you. You are not being honest, and I don't like it. Cut it out. I said, we don't have enough resources to get things done in the timeline that you want them done. That's a management problem. You need to go to your management and say that the system administration team needs more system administrators in order to get things done in a timely fashion. But cheating like this just makes things worse. So cut it out. So they went to upper management, and upper management came back to them and said, your thing actually isn't that important. You don't have to get it done right away. You can wait 2 months. Which is not the answer that they wanted, but it was an answer, and it's a solution to a moral dilemma. Maybe you don't have to work over the weekend.
What do you do when
you have a moral dilemma, but the person that you would have to delegate it to is someone who would not make a moral decision. Like, say it is that situation with upper management, but you know that upper management will push it through anyways.
That is a problem, and it is a great segue into the next slide, okay?
I mean, there are other options to quit, too.
Basically, that's right.
But I also think that quitting isn't unambiguously good, necessarily.
It's-
It's not unambiguously good, it's a massive moral dilemma.
It is a major problem if for no other reason than in the United States we have this brain-damaged healthcare system where your healthcare and your family's healthcare is tied to your job. No other major Western democracy has a system like our system does, and it is a recipe for economic slavery. But let me get real here. This is the system we are in, and it is a real world. It is a real world problem. So if I am fired or if I resign because of a solution for a moral dilemma, all of a sudden I don't have health care, my wife doesn't have health care, my children don't have health care. I can go out on the private market and get individual health care. Do you know how much that costs these days?
Like $2,000 a month.
Yeah, and so last time I looked at the unemployment benefits, they maxed out here at Washington State at $2,100 a month, and that's considered generous, yes?
No, it isn't.
It's more.
They max out at 4,000.
4,000?
Yes.
Oh, good, okay, so great. So that means that if you have to pay $2,000 a month for individual health care for you and your family, healthcare is only going to take 50% of your budget instead of all of it. That's still way too much. So this is one of the real world considerations that you have to go think about. How much harm is it going to do to my family, my wife, my children? They're ethical stakeholders too. It is not a simple solution. Now, one of the other things that happened in America, this is something called the law of unintended consequences, with the rise of two-income families. When you go read articles about how my wife got a job, and so that makes our lives more secure, because if I lose my job, she's got her job. And isn't this wonderful? And it was back in the 70s. But then people started saying, well, because my family has two incomes, we can now buy a more expensive house, a more expensive car. We can go on vacations. We don't have to set aside money for a rainy day because we've got the second income. But wait a second. Now, if either of us loses our job, now we're in deep trouble. Maybe not from health care, because presumably the spouse's company will provide the health insurance. But still, it is an issue. And I do not want to denigrate the women's liberation movement in any way, shape, or form, but this was an unintended consequence of what happened. And American society needs to tilt in order to accommodate that. But until then, and this is a utopian ideal, until then, the decision about whether to quit or to acquiesce is a non-trivial decision. It is very subtle. It puts a lot of pressure on you. I don't envy anybody who finds himself in that position. And I was actually chatting with my rabbi about this because I wanted to have a better answer. And she said, Jeff, there is no better answer. It sucks. And that is the rabbinic term for the situation. I keep pushing the wrong button. Okay, so this is Eric Snowden. Eric Snowden was a system administrator at the CIA, and he discovered a bunch of things that the CIA was doing was illegal. And he went through channels. The CIA has a mechanism for reporting illegal behavior. It didn't work. So he leaked the information, which was a major breach of national security, and he then fled to the Soviet Union, and he is now a Russian citizen. And the Russian government is taking very good care of him. His girlfriend married him, and he's making a life in Russia. The United States wants him back very badly. There are people in this country who would like to have him shot because they view him as a traitor. And there are other people that want to give him a ticker tape parade because he's a hero. He exposed that the CIA's mechanism for detecting and ameliorating illegal behavior was ineffective. And the CIA claims that they're a better organization now for having had the Snowden affair. Whether they actually do or not, no one really knows. But if you go ask a CIA apologist, is the mechanism for reporting and dealing with illegal, immoral behavior stronger now for the Snowden affair, they'll say, yes, it is.
Can't we just shoot the system administrator that left the hole open, allowing him to download all this?
He was the system administrator.
Yeah, I know, but still, somewhere,
Well,
there's some auditing problem.
So, the thing about being a system administrator
I say
is
that
that.
tongue in cheek, by the way.
Oh, I understand that, but it's a very real problem. If you'll recall, when I first started this discussion, one of the things that I alluded to was how do you have a trustworthy system where the system administrator is not trustworthy?
I remember going into big Ford computer labs, and they would weigh you going in and weigh you going out
Yes.
to make sure you're not bringing anything.
Yes, that's right. There was a company that I worked at that insisted that you use a special shell so that every keystroke that you typed was recorded. And because I was a system administrator, I was able to look at the log files that had recordings of every keystroke that I typed. If I'm in VI and I go : that system would give me access to a shell that the keystroke recording system did not record. So I figured out how to defeat the system. And then I went back to management and I said, there's this hole in your keystroke recording system that a knowledgeable person can exploit, because anybody can run VI. And they said, okay, well, what are you going to do about it? And I researched it and couldn't come up with a good answer. And that was one of the reasons why they let me go. Not because I found the vulnerability, but because I couldn't figure out how to plug it.
I mean, I'm so happy the CIA does things illegal, but the systems should have been designed so anyone could download and leak it.
I agree.
So there's actually a third actor here, which is whatever organization built that shell that in which he lived.
Yes. Your point's well taken. I agree with you.
But at some level, we still have to have, you have top level security, we have to take oaths. We have to live by our reputations,
Yes.
right? And so, the systems are never gonna be perfect. So, it still comes down to us.
Yes, that's right. So, one of the things that we have to worry about is people destroying data that we're responsible for. So the picture on the right is from 1938, and the picture on the left is from 2025. And the only difference is that on the right, they're burning books, and on the left, they're burning media. But this is still people in power that are destroying information. They're trying to suppress something. And in both cases, it is immoral. And we as system administrators have to figure out how to protect against this sort of thing. And quite frankly, I don't know how to do it. It's more than just making a backup tape and taking it home. Because if you're taking a backup tape and taking it home for safekeeping, is it really safe? If you store defense records in a cardboard box in your bathroom, is that a safe place to keep it?
As safe as Signal.
I beg your pardon?
Yeah, but when you add a journalist to the chat.
There is a meme with a scene from Star Wars where there are a bunch of Imperial troopers marching down a corridor, and one of the troopers has been photoshopped off and has been replaced with Big Bird from Sesame Street. And the caption reads, "When you include a journalist in one of your Signal chats." So this is an issue. We as system administrators have to figure out a technical means of protecting against this sort of thing. And I have been lying awake at night wondering how to go about doing it. And I do not have an answer. And I'm hoping that maybe someone in this room will go off and think about it and come up with a solution that works. And quite frankly, I don't know what that is.
That obsolescence of backup tapes will take care of that.
I beg your pardon?
That obsolescence of backup tapes will take care of that.
Maybe. We'll see.
We'll just store it on AWS.
Whoops.
No, give us a link to a DNA storage, it's a
Okay.
fascinating area.
Oh, did you say DNA storage?
DNA storage.
Mm-hmm.
And CubeSat here, you keep the data of a whole data center.
Yeah. So here are some questions that I would like you to ponder. And these questions, insofar as I know, have no good answers. But in particular, question number 2. One of the things that makes us unique, that makes us special, is that we have technical knowledge that is not generally available. So there are a couple of hundred people attending Linux Fest. There are 6 million people in the state of Washington, the overwhelming majority of whom are not here. And you know something? That's the way it ought to be. But we have this special expertise by virtue of the fact of what we do for a living, the fact that we're here going through training. This makes us valuable commodities. It gives us a certain amount of authority to go speak on these issues, to come up with solutions. And just because I don't know the answers does not mean that the answers are not out there. And I would challenge you to go think about these questions and think about the kinds of people that you are, the things that you've done, the things that you've heard, to come up with answers. So now, here's the final exam. So there's open book, open computer, open notes, open neighbor, open internet. Use of ChatGPT or other artificial intelligence is not allowed. If you wish to pray or consult with a religious expert, that is perfectly acceptable. The deadline is midnight before the next general election. And does everybody understand the rules? So then here's the question.
I'm sorry, Kate.
Whoops, I'm sorry. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I do. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. You know what I should have done if I was smart is I would have had a handout with the URL for this because, and I apologize for it. Anyway, so here's the final exam. This is not a theoretical question. It turns out that according to CNN, the Washington Post, and the New York Times, this is actually happening, that in order to induce people to leave the country, people are entering in names of living people into the Social Security Administration's death master file. And it turns out that the death master file is available. If you pay $3,000, you can get weekly updates for it. And you can use that to prevent fraud in your own organization. So it is against the law to make an erroneous entry, deliberately make an erroneous entry into a federal database and entering the name of someone who's alive into a database of people who are dead is clearly a false entry. And so this is illegal, and here are the references to United States law. So this exam is pass-fail, and of course you get bonus points if you do your own legal research, and you're just going to have to figure out what it means to get bonus points on a pass-fail exam. So this next slide is the references where I got some of this information, and it would really help if you had the URL for the slide, so that way you could just click on these links. And I think I did this somewhere. More references, more references, more references. This is something that seemed like a good idea about when I created this presentation. But I'm actually way over time, so I'm kind of rushing. And I want to thank you, because when I originally started this presentation, I didn't think I'd be able to fill 45 minutes, or else I thought I would be able to fill 2 weeks. And I managed to get it done in just a little more than an hour. If you email me, I will send you the link, or if you can get it off of this QR code. I found a really neat module in Python that generates QR codes. So I want to thank you for participating in this seminar, the 3 of you that got kicked out and invited back in. I apologize for treating you so rudely, but thank you. And you guys deserve a round of applause. And Paul, I want to see you. You're not getting away.